ready to explore a civilization that, well, thrived for centuries,
Arrived.
only to vanish, really, in the blink of an eye
Yeah.
today. We're diving deep into the Aztec Empire, going beyond, I think, those myths and legends,
Right.
to uncover a world of startling complexity. We'll be sifting through excerpts from Wikipedia's article on the Aztecs,
Okay.
which is surprisingly detailed.
And often misunderstood.
Yeah.
We tend to imagine empires as kind of monolithic, centrally controlled,
Yeah.
entities.
Yeah.
But the Aztecs, or more accurately, the Triple Alliance, were a fascinating departure from this model.
The Triple Alliance. Okay, let's unpack this. It sounds like we're starting with the terminology shakeup already.
Absolutely. The term Aztec Empire itself is a bit anachronistic. These were three distinct Nahua city-states.
Yeah.
Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan, who formed, a powerful alliance. They dominated a vast swath of Mesoamerica, not through direct rule,
Okay.
but rather through strategic partnerships and a system of tribute. It was all about power dynamics and alliances, much like a complex game of chess.
So less about conquering every inch of land and more about strategically placing your bishops and rooks, so to speak.
Yes.
What were the aims of this tribute system?
It was a fascinating system that went beyond simple resource extraction.
Okay.
Conquered cities had to send goods like textiles, foodstuffs, even warriors to the alliance. But they also maintained a degree of autonomy in their internal affairs. This created a complex web of interconnectedness and power dynamics that frankly could shift at any moment.
And within these city-states, how is society structured? We've got to talk about those intimidating warrior classes.
Of course, imagine a society with distinct classes: nobles, warriors, priests, and commoners, including merchants called poteca, who wielded significant economic influence.
Okay.
Interestingly, the Aztecs had a degree of social mobility.
Really?
A commoner who demonstrated exceptional bravery in battle could climb the ranks.
A warrior meritocracy, almost. That's not what I pictured at all.
Precisely. It's one of those details that shatter our preconceived notions.
Yeah.
But let's not forget the ever-present influence of religion. The Aztecs' belief system, with its emphasis on cyclical time and the need to appease the gods, permeated every aspect of their lives.
Okay.
And it's this belief system that fueled their infamous practice of human sacrifice, particularly to honor Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war.
Speaking of Huitzilopochtli, weren't the Aztecs originally a group of mercenaries trying to find their footing in the Valley of Mexico?
Exactly. Their origin story is one of ambition and, dare I say, ruthlessness.
Okay.
They started as hired muscle for the dominant city-state of Culhuacan, but quickly realized their own potential. Legend has it that they even sacrificed the daughter of the Culhuacan ruler as an offering to Huitzilopochtli.
That's one way to make a statement. So how did they go from this brazen act to establishing their own magnificent capital, Tenochtitlan?
It all goes back to a prophecy. Legend says they were searching for a sign. An eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a snake.
Oh, wow.
They found this sign on a marshy island in Lake Texcoco. That's where they built Tenochtitlan, the city that would become a testament to their power and ingenuity.
Talk about symbolic origins. And talk about a challenging location. I mean, a city on a lake. How did they pull that off?
It was a marvel of engineering and a testament to their resourcefulness.
Yeah.
They constructed causeways and canals,
Yeah.
essentially creating a floating metropolis.
Mm.
And we can't forget the chinampas, those floating gardens
Yeah.
that allowed them to thrive in this unlikely environment.
Right.
But this incredible city, this symbol of Aztec might, wouldn't have existed without their prowess as warriors.
Right. I remember reading about the Flower Wars. Ritualistic battles with a rather unsettling purpose. Tell our listener a bit about that.
Imagine this. Ritualized warfare. Prearranged battles with neighboring city-states, not primarily for territorial gain, but to capture prisoners. These captives weren't destined for dungeons, but for the sacrificial altars. For the Aztecs, it was a way to honor the gods, maintain cosmic balance, and train their warriors.
It's a completely different worldview, isn't it? This idea of ritualized warfare, feeding the gods with human hearts. How did they become so dominant in the Valley of Mexico, though? Was it simply through brute force and these flower wars?
It was more nuanced than that.
Okay.
While they were incredibly skilled warriors, their rise to dominance was also a matter of cunning strategy and political maneuvering. A pivotal moment in their history, the Tepanec War of 1426, showcases this perfectly.
I'm intrigued. Set the scene for us. What sparked this conflict?
Think classic power struggle. The Tepanec king dies, leaving a void and a scramble for control.
Oh, okay.
The Aztecs seized this opportunity. allying with rebel factions against the ruling Tepanec power structure. This culminated in a decisive victory for the Aztecs and the birth of the Triple Alliance in 1428.
A strategic alliance. Always a good move in a power vacuum. And this alliance, I'm assuming, was their ticket to becoming the dominant force in Mesoamerica. Who are the key players behind this calculated rise?
Now we're talking about the architects of empire. We have Itzcoatl Moctezuma.
Thanks. And a figure who I understand deserves a chapter all to himself, Tlaloc. What made him so instrumental in shaping the Aztec world?
Tlacalo. Now there's a name
Right.
to conjure with. Imagine a figure who was not just a skilled warrior, but a shrewd politician, a religious reformer, and a master strategist all rolled into one. He was the power behind the throne for decades, serving as the Cihuacatl, a position often compared to a kind of like a prime minister.
Cihuacatl. For those of us who aren't fluent in Nahuatl, could you elaborate on what that role entailed?
Of course. It's a title that doesn't have a direct equivalent in modern terms. Think of it as a blend of advisor-administrator and religious figure, wielding immense influence within the Triple Alliance. Tlaloc used this position to implement sweeping social and religious reforms, essentially reshaping Aztec society to consolidate power and promote a unified identity.
What kind of reforms are we talking about here? Give our listener a sense of his impact.
Well, for one, he's credited with establishing the institution of the Flower Wars as we know them, formalizing them, you might say. He also revamped the education system, established a stricter legal code, and even some scholars argue, revised historical records to bolster the Aztecs' claim to divine right and legitimize their rule. He understood the power of narrative, of shaping how people understood their place in the world.
That's fascinating. This wasn't just about military conquest. It was about controlling the very story of the Aztec people.
Yes.
But with all this talk of warfare and sacrifice, it's easy to forget that this was a complex civilization with its own legal systems, codes of conduct, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Aztecs might be known for their warrior culture, but they were also deeply invested in maintaining order and justice within their society. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They didn't just have laws. They had courts, judges, and even a system for appeals.
The appeals, like a Supreme Court almost. That's incredibly advanced for their time.
It certainly challenges our assumptions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it gets even more intriguing when you compare the legal systems in different city-states. Tenochtitlan, for example, had a relatively informal system based on oral tradition and precedent.
Okay.
But in Texcoco, under the rule of the poet king Nezahualcóyotl, they developed a highly sophisticated legal code. It was written down, meticulously structured, and addressed everything from theft and murder to land disputes and social hierarchy.
A poet king who's also a legal scholar. These Aztecs were full of surprises. This legal system, this desire for order. It makes you think about those stories of Tenochtitlan, the city itself. It wasn't just a military stronghold, right?
Absolutely not.
Wow.
Imagine this, a bustling metropolis, built on an island in the middle of a lake,
Yeah.
connected by causeways and canals, a testament to Aztec engineering and urban planning. We're talking about a city with towering temples, palaces, marketplaces teeming with goods from across Mesoamerica. And those floating gardens, the chinampas we discussed earlier, they weren't just a source of food. They were integrated into the very fabric of the city, creating this incredible blend of nature and human ingenuity.
It's like something out of a fantasy novel. And speaking of incredible feats, we've got to delve into the world of Aztec mythology. Earlier, you mentioned Huitzilopochtli, the god of war. Are there any other tales that give us a glimpse into their beliefs?
Oh, Aztec mythology is a treasure trove of epic tales and symbolism. But one story that stands out, particularly because it's immortalized in Aztec sculpture, is the legend of Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess.
I've seen images of that sculpture, the dismembered goddess. It's both beautiful and a little terrifying. What's the story there?
It's a story of family drama on a cosmic scale. Coyolxauhqui and her 400 brothers, outraged that their mother was pregnant with Huitzilopochtli, decided to attack her. Talk about sibling rivalry, right?
You think your family reunions are awkward?
Right. But Huitzilopochtli was born fully grown and battle-ready. He defeated Coyolxauhqui, dismembered her, and cast her body down the mountain. It's like a violent tale, but one that speaks to the Aztecs' worldview, the eternal struggle between light and darkness, order and chaos.
And this myth, this epic battle, it wasn't just a story, was it? It served a purpose.
Exactly. It legitimized their militarism, their belief in Huitzilopochtli's supremacy, their very right to rule. But, as with all empires, their reign wouldn't last forever. And this is where we have to talk about the arrival of a certain Spanish conquistador, Hernan Cortés.
In 1519, right, marking a turning point, not just in Aztec history, but in the trajectory of the Americas. But before we get into that fateful encounter, I'm curious about something. You mentioned earlier that the Aztecs had a vast network of informants. Did they have any forewarning of the Spanish arrival?
You're right to point that out. The Aztecs were masters of intelligence gathering. They had runners, traders, and diplomats, constantly bringing back information from the farthest reaches of their realm. So it's highly likely they had some idea that something was brewing beyond their borders.
So they weren't caught entirely off guard. What was their initial reaction? Did they see the Spanish as a threat, as invaders, or was there something else at play?
This is where historical interpretations get fascinating. You often hear about Moctezuma II, the Aztec ruler at the time, mistaking Cortés for a returning god, Quetzalcoatl. While this makes for a good story, the reality is likely more complex.
I was just thinking that. Always seemed a bit simplistic.
It certainly doesn't capture the full picture. The Aztecs were known for their pragmatism, their ability to adapt to changing circumstances. They were also masters of diplomacy. It's far more likely that Moctezuma played for time, sending emissaries with gifts, observing the Spanish, trying to assess their true intentions.
That makes a lot more sense, a calculated approach rather than blind panic.
Exactly. It speaks to their political acumen. But unfortunately for the Aztecs, they were facing a foe unlike any they'd encountered before, not just in terms of weaponry and tactics, but also in the form of an invisible enemy, disease.
Right, the devastating impact of smallpox. It's easy to forget how much of a role disease played in the fall of the Aztec Empire.
It's estimated that smallpox wiped out up to half of the indigenous population, including large numbers of Aztec warriors. Imagine trying to fight a war when your entire civilization is being ravaged by a sickness they have no immunity to.
It's hard to overstate how much that would weaken their defenses. But Cortez's victory wasn't solely due to disease, was it? He had help from within, didn't he?
You're right to point that out. Cortés was a skilled strategist and a master manipulator. He quickly realized he could exploit existing tensions within the Aztec Empire.
Okay.
He forged alliances with city-states like Tlaxcalans, who had long chafed under Aztec rule, and saw an opportunity to break free.
So he used their own system of alliances against them, a brilliant, if ruthless, tactic. And wasn't there a woman, Lama Lynch, who played a pivotal role in all of this?
Ah, Lama Lynch, she's one of the most fascinating and controversial figures in this whole saga.
Right.
Originally from a noble Aztec family. She was enslaved, then given to Cortés as a translator. She was fluent in Mayan, Nahuatl, and eventually Spanish, becoming absolutely indispensable to Cortés.
A bridge between worlds, almost. What was her role in the conflict?
She wasn't just translating languages, she was translating cultures, helping Cortés understand Aztec customs, beliefs, and weaknesses. Some see her as a traitor, others as a survivor caught between empires. Her story is a stark reminder of the complexities of conquest. It's never a simple case of good versus evil, but a messy tangle of loyalties, betrayals, and unforeseen consequences.
And what about the final days of Tenochtitlan? How did this once mighty city fall?
It was a brutal siege, lasting months.
Oh, wow.
Cortés, with his indigenous allies and superior weaponry, surrounded the city, cutting off supply lines, bombarding it with cannons. The Aztecs fought bravely, even resorting to desperate measures, like hurling stones from catapults, fashioned from the timbers of their own temples.
A last stand, defending their home against insurmountable odds.
Precisely, but weakened by disease, starvation, and relentless attacks. Tenochtitlan eventually fell in August of 1521. It was a tragic end to a civilization that had thrived for centuries.
A civilization that left an undeniable mark on history.
Absolutely, and one that still holds valuable lessons for us today about the nature of power, the impact of cultural clashes, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? If things had unfolded differently, if disease hadn't ravaged their population, if alliances hadn't shifted, if the cultural divide hadn't been so vast, would the outcome have been different? Or was a clash of this magnitude inevitable?
It's one of those tantalizing what-ifs that historians will debate for centuries to come. And that's the beauty of history, isn't it? It's not just a collection of dates and facts, but a tapestry woven from countless individual stories, each thread adding to the richness and complexity of the past.
A tapestry that continues to fascinate and challenge us, even today. Thank you, listener, for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the heart of the Aztec Empire. We hope you've come away with a newfound appreciation for this complex and often misunderstood civilization. Until next time, Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those what ifs coming.